Thor was the strongest being in the 9 worlds. He was also the easiest god to fool. Those two things existed at the same time for the entire length of Norse mythology, and nobody who worshipped him wanted to think about that too carefully. Odin had wisdom, Freya had magic, Tyr had law, Heimdall had foresight, Bragi had poetry. The Norse pantheon was full of gods who brought something specific and irreplaceable to the problem of running 9 worlds that were constantly trying to destroy each other. Thor brought Mjolnir. That was it. The most worshipped god in the Norse world, the deity whose name appears in more place names and personal names and days of the week than any other figure in the mythology, showed up to every situation with a hammer and the sincere belief that the hammer was the correct response to whatever was happening. He was not wrong as often as he should have been. Thor was the son of Odin and the earth goddess Jord. Born large, grew larger. By the time the mythology has anything to say about him, he is already the strongest living being in the 9 worlds, a fact the sources establish early and repeat often because it is genuinely the most important thing about him, and he knows it, and everyone around him knows it, and the entire structure of his existence is built around it. Red hair, red beard, eyes the sources describe as burning like fire. He ate and drank in quantities remarkable even by divine standards, entire oxen at a sitting, barrels of mead that would have drowned lesser beings. He was not subtle about any of this. Subtlety was not a quality Thor possessed or particularly valued. He was loud and direct and physical, in a way that left no ambiguity about what he was or what he intended to do. What he intended to do was always the same thing. The hammer. Mjolnir was not simply a weapon. In Norse cosmology, it was the most important object in existence for the continued survival of gods and humans alike. The giants, the Jotnar, the primordial forces of chaos and destruction that existed before the gods and would outlast most of them, were the constant existential threat to Asgard and Midgard. They were older than the gods. Many were larger. Some were smarter. What they were not was stronger than Thor. Mjolnir was the reason the giants had not already won. The entire structure of Norse cosmology, the reason Asgard still stood and Midgard still existed, and humans could live their lives without being crushed by forces older and larger and more powerful than anything they could comprehend. All of it rested on Thor being strong enough to kill giants, and Mjolnir being the instrument through which that killing occurred. He was very good at killing giants. He was not particularly good at anything else. Odin went to extraordinary lengths to accumulate wisdom. He hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days to obtain the runes. He gave up one of his eyes for a single drink from Mimir's well of knowledge. He disguised himself and wandered the 9 worlds gathering information, understanding the shape of things. Odin treated wisdom as the most valuable resource in existence and spent his entire divine existence trying to get more of it, because he understood that the future was coming, and understanding it was the only real defense against it. Thor did not do any of this. Thor went east and killed giants. This was his solution to most problems. When the giants were threatening something, Thor went and hit them until they stopped. When a giant had taken something from Asgard, Thor went and hit the giant until the thing was returned, or the giant was dead, which also solved the problem. When things were complicated and unclear, Thor assessed whether hitting something would help, and if the answer was yes, he did that. The answer was usually yes. The problem was the situations where the answer was no. There were more of those than the mythology is sometimes given credit for. Strength at the level Thor possessed is genuinely useful in a very specific category of problem. It is not useful in a much larger category that requires something other than hitting things very hard. Thor kept encountering that larger category. He kept responding with the hammer anyway. The results were mixed in ways that the most worshipped god in the Norse world probably preferred not to dwell on. Loki was always there. This is the detail that gets lost when the mythology is retold as a simple story about a trickster who eventually betrayed the gods. Before the betrayal, before the binding, before everything that led to Ragnarok, Loki spent most of his existence standing next to Thor. Not because he was forced to, because Thor needed him there, and both of them understood it. The most unlikely partnership in the 9 worlds, Thor was direct, physical, uncomplicated. Loki was oblique, verbal, constitutionally incapable of approaching any situation the way it expected to be approached. Thor trusted strength, because strength had never failed him. Loki trusted cleverness, because he had nothing else, and had learned early that cleverness, applied correctly, could defeat almost anything strength could not. Together, they worked. Separately, they were both considerably more dangerous to themselves. The mythology sends them on quests together repeatedly, and the pattern is always the same. Thor provides the force that makes the mission possible. Loki provides the intelligence that keeps it from becoming a disaster. Without Thor, Loki cannot back up any of the promises his cleverness gets him into. Without Loki, Thor walks into situations that strength alone cannot resolve, and does not notice until he is already in them. The journey to Utgard is the clearest example. Thor and Loki traveled east toward the land of the giants. They picked up 2 human companions, Thialfi and Roskva, children of a farmer whose house they had stayed at. They came to a vast hall and slept in it. The hall turned out to be the thumb of a giant's glove. The giant was Skrymir, so large that when Thor hit him 3 times with Mjolnir while he slept, 3 blows that would have killed anything else in the 9 worlds, Skrymir woke up each time and asked if a leaf had fallen on him, or an acorn, or a twig. Thor hit Skrymir 3 times with the hammer that had killed hundreds of giants. Skrymir asked about leaves. This was the first sign that something was wrong. Thor did not fully process it. They continued to Utgard, the castle of the giant king Utgard Loki, who suggested that a being of Thor's reputation should have no trouble competing in a few simple contests. Thor lost all of them. He lost a drinking contest against a horn secretly connected to the ocean, 3 massive swallows, and barely lowered the level. He lost a lifting contest against a cat that was secretly the Midgard Serpent in disguise, could not get all 4 paws off the ground. He lost a wrestling match against an old woman named Ellie, who turned out to be the physical embodiment of old age itself, could not put her down. Utgard. Loki revealed the truth when they were leaving. Every contest had been an illusion. The horn was the ocean. Thor had drunk so much that the tides had visibly lowered. The cat was the Midgard Serpent, the creature whose size encircled the entire world. And Thor had lifted it high enough that the gods in Asgard had been genuinely frightened. The old woman was old age itself, and no living being had ever put her fully down. That Thor had lost 3 contests against the ocean, the world's serpent, and mortality. That he was furious when he understood this. He raised Mjolnir, and Utgard Loki and his castle vanished instantly, leaving Thor standing in an empty field, holding a hammer with nobody to hit. The story is usually told as a demonstration of Thor's hidden greatness. The contests seemed like losses, but were near victories against impossible opponents. That reading is not wrong. It is also not the whole picture. That Thor had been tricked, thoroughly, completely, without detecting it at any point. The contest was against Thor, specifically because Thor was the one whose reputation made the trick worth performing. Utgard Loki had gone to elaborate lengths to deceive the strongest being in the 9 worlds, because he understood that if Thor arrived with accurate information about what he was actually facing, he would destroy it. The trick was not an insult. It was a measure of how dangerous Thor was. It was also proof that dangerous and wise were not the same thing, and that the most dangerous being in the 9 worlds could be led through an elaborate deception from beginning to end without once stopping to ask what was actually happening. Loki understood this about Thor. It was part of why the partnership worked. Loki asked the questions Thor did not think to ask, read the situations Thor walked into without reading, noticed what was wrong before it became a problem requiring hitting. He also used it. Not always against Thor, not even usually, but the quality in Thor that made him easy to trick, the directness, the assumption that what he was seeing was what was there, the trust in his own strength that made alternative approaches feel unnecessary. That quality did not stop being useful to Loki, just because they were on the same side. When Mjolnir was stolen by the giant Thrym, who demanded Freya as his bride for its return, the gods convened. Freya was not going to marry a giant. Heimdall suggested Thor dress as a bride and go in Freya's place. Thor, quote, immediate response was no, absolutely not. The idea of Thor in a wedding dress was an offense against everything he understood himself to be, and he said so at considerable length. Loki pointed out that without Mjolnir, the giants would be in Asgard within the week. Thor put on the dress. Loki dressed as his handmaiden. They went to Thrym's hall. The wedding feast began. Thor ate an entire ox, 8 salmon, and all the delicacies set aside for the women, and drank 3 barrels of mead. Thrym remarked that he had never seen a woman with such an appetite, that Loki said Freya had been so excited about the wedding that she had not eaten in 8 days, that Thrym tried to kiss his bride under the veil and recoiled from the burning eyes he found there, that Loki said Freya had been so excited about the wedding that she had not slept in 8 days, that Thrym called for Mjolnir to be brought out to consecrate the marriage, that Thor grabbed it the moment it was in reach. The rest of the evening was brief. This story is usually told as comedy. Thor in a dress, the absurdity of it, the most masculine figure in Norse mythology sitting at a wedding feast pretending to be a bride, while Loki covers for his appetite and his eyes, and his general failure to be convincing as a woman. It is comedy. It is also the clearest demonstration of how the partnership actually functioned. Without Loki, Thor could not have maintained the disguise for 10 minutes. Without Thor, Loki had no way to retrieve the hammer once they were inside. The mission required both of them doing what they were good at and trusting the other to do what they were not. Loki covered for Thor's inability to be subtle. Thor provided the violence at the end when subtlety was no longer needed. They worked. The tragedy of the mythology is not that Loki eventually turned. It is that the partnership that had held the 9 worlds together ended, and what replaced it on both sides was a diminished version of what either of them had been when they were operating together. Thor, without Loki, was still the strongest being in the 9 worlds. He was also alone in every situation that required something other than that. There were a lot of those situations. He faced them with the hammer anyway. The giants were supposed to be the problem Thor solved. That was the arrangement. The gods handled the complicated things, the politics, the magic, the prophecy, the careful management of a cosmos that was always one bad decision away from coming apart. Thor handled the giants. A clean division of labor that worked because Thor was genuinely exceptional at his part of it. No giant Thor found and hit with Mjolnir remained a problem for long. The issue was the giants who understood this and planned accordingly. Alvis was a dwarf who had been promised Thor's daughter Thrud as a wife. The sources do not explain who made this promise or when. What they record is that Alvis arrived to claim her, and Thor, who had not been consulted about any arrangement involving his daughter, was not pleased. He could not simply hit Alvis. Dwarves were not giants. Hitting a dwarf who had arrived to claim a bride someone had apparently promised him was not the correct response, and even Thor understood this dimly. The situation required something other than Mjolnir. Thor asked questions instead. He told Alvis that before he could take Thrud, he would need to demonstrate his knowledge. Alvis, who was genuinely knowledgeable and proud of it, and possibly not aware of how long a conversation with Thor could last if Thor wanted it to, agreed. Thor asked him what the earth was called in each of the 9 worlds, then the sky, then the moon, then the sun, then the clouds, then the wind, then the calm, then the sea, then the fire, then the forest, then the night, then the grain, then the ale. Alvis answered every question correctly and in full. By the time he finished, the sun had risen. Dwarves turned to stone in sunlight. Alvis turned to stone. Thor had defeated a dwarf by asking enough questions to keep him talking until dawn. The only recorded instance of Thor winning anything through patience and verbal strategy rather than Mjolnir, and the sources treated as remarkable enough to record in full, which suggests it was understood to be unusual. He also, it should be noted, prevented his daughter's marriage to someone he had not approved of by turning the suitor to stone rather than hitting him. Arguably more elegant than his usual approach, even if the elegance was accidental. He never did it again. Back at Utgard, there was a second failure that gets less attention than the drinking and lifting and wrestling contests. Thialfi, the human boy who had joined Thor on the journey, raced a giant named Hugi. Hugi won easily, then won again, then won a third time by a margin that left no question. Thialfi was fast for a human. Hugi was thought itself. The contest was between a human's speed and the speed of thought, and thought moves faster than anything in physical space. Thor did not notice his companion was racing thought. He was focused on his own contests. This is a small detail in a larger story, but it reveals something consistent. Thor moved through situations, absorbing what was directly in front of him, and not much else. The peripheral information, the context that would have told him what he was actually dealing with, the signs that things were not what they appeared, these did not register because Thor was not looking for them. He was looking at the next thing to compete against or hit or overcome. Thought Odin would have noticed what Hugi was before the first race. Loki might have noticed. Thor competed seriously in 3 contests against the ocean, the world serpent, and old age, and did not notice anything was wrong until a giant king explained it to him on his way out. The most dangerous being in the 9 worlds was also, in a very specific and consistent way, not particularly observant. The Midgard Serpent deserves its own account because Thor encountered it 3 times, and each encounter reveals something different about who he was. The first was at Utgard, disguised as a cat. Thor lifted it partially, did not know what he was lifting, moved on. The second was a fishing trip. Thor went fishing with the giant Hymir. He used an ox head as bait. The Midgard Serpent took it. What followed was the closest thing in Norse mythology to a fair contest between Thor and something genuinely his equal. The serpent that encircled the world on one end of the line, Thor hauling against it with everything he had, his feet going through the bottom of the boat with the effort. Hymir watching with growing terror that Thor got the serpent to the surface. He raised Mjolnir, that Hymir cut the line, that the serpent sank back into the ocean. That Thor threw Mjolnir at Hymir in fury. Hymir survived. The serpent was still alive. Thor had been closer to killing it than he had ever been, and would ever be again until Ragnarok. And a giant's fear had ended the moment before it could happen. That Thor threw Hymir into the ocean and waded to shore. He did not catch the serpent. He did not kill the giant. He waded to shore alone, and the sources do not record what he did next, which suggests there was nothing satisfying to record. The third encounter was Ragnarok. Thor faced the Midgard Serpent, knowing what it was and knowing what was coming, and knowing, because the Norse gods knew their fates and faced them anyway, that it would kill him. He killed the serpent. He took 9 steps. On the 10th step, he fell, poisoned by the venom the serpent had breathed on him as it died. Not 8 steps and then fell, not 10, 9. Enough to have cleared the serpent's body, enough to put some distance between himself and the thing that had just killed him. Not enough to reach anyone or anything. Just 9 steps on ground already shaking with the end of the world. And then, down. Thor had known this was coming. He had known for long enough that the knowing had become part of the background of his existence, the way any certain future eventually becomes part of the texture of the present. The serpent would kill him, and he would kill the serpent, and that was the shape of his ending. He did not try to avoid it. This is not obvious when you consider what Thor was like everywhere else in his mythology. He was not given to acceptance or patience or the quiet recognition that some things were larger than his ability to hit them. He hit things. That was what he did. The idea of accepting an outcome the hammer could not change ran against everything he was in every other story the mythology tells about him. And yet, he went to Ragnarok. He faced the serpent. He killed it and let it kill him, and took 9 steps and fell, and the world burned, and the oceans swallowed what was left. And somewhere in all of that, the god who had solved every problem with a hammer spent the last of what he had on something that could not be solved any other way. The serpent had to die. Thor was the only one who could kill it. That was the whole calculation. Not complicated, not strategic. Just the most direct possible understanding of what the situation required, and the willingness to provide it regardless of what it cost. Odin died at Ragnarok too. The wolf Fenrir swallowed him. Vidar, Odin's son, killed Fenrir in revenge. Odin's death was avenged, and the arc of that story had a shape you could trace and find meaning in. Thor. Quotes 9 steps have no arc, no revenge. His sons Modi and Magni survive Ragnarok and inherit Mjolnir, but they are not avenging him because the serpent is already dead. There is nothing to complete. Just 9 steps, and then the ground. And then the new world that grows from the ruins of the old one, green and fresh, where Thor's sons carry his hammer into a future he did not live to see. He did not ask for a better ending. He did not receive one. He went where he needed to go and did what needed to be done, and the cost was everything, and he paid it. The most powerful being in the 9 worlds took 9 steps. That was all he had left. That was enough. The gods of Asgard were not built for ordinary people. Odin was the god of kings, of warriors who died in battle, of poets and sorcerers, and those who sought knowledge at prices most people were not willing to pay. He was distant and complicated, and his favor was not something you wanted to attract because his favor and his curse looked similar from the outside, and you rarely knew which one you had until it was too late. People respected Odin the way you respect something that could destroy you without particularly intending to. Carefully, from a distance. Freya was the goddess of love and war and magic and the dead who did not go to Valhalla. Powerful, real, with her own complicated relationship with humans that the mythology records in fragments. But her domain was specific. You prayed to Freya for things within what Freya governed, and those things were not the daily concerns of most people's lives. Tyr was the god of law and justice, respected, invoked for oaths and legal proceedings. Not the god you thought about when the harvest was failing, or the storm was coming, or the sea was getting rough in ways that suggested the boat might not make it. Thor was the god you thought about then. Not because he was wise, not because his judgment was reliable or his approach sophisticated, because he was strong enough to kill the things that wanted to kill you, and simple enough that you could understand what he was and what he wanted and how to reach him. This mattered more than it sounds. The Norse world was not a comfortable place. The mythology is unusually honest about this. Ragnarok was coming. Everyone knew it. The gods knew it, the humans knew it, the giants knew it, the world serpents circling in the ocean knew it. The end was not a possibility or a threat. It was a scheduled event moving toward them with the inevitability of something set in motion before any of the current participants had existed. In that context, what ordinary people needed from their gods was not wisdom about the shape of things. They had the shape of things. The shape of things was bad and getting worse, and would eventually end in fire and flood and the death of everything that mattered. What they needed was something that would stand between them and the things trying to kill them right now, today, this season, this winter, before the larger ending came. Thor stood between them and those things. He stood there with a hammer and a complete absence of strategic sophistication, and a genuine, uncomplicated willingness to hit whatever needed hitting until it stopped being a problem. And for the farmers and sailors and craftsmen and ordinary humans who made up most of the Norse world, that was exactly what they needed. The farmers prayed to Thor because thunder meant rain, and rain meant crops, and crops meant surviving the winter. The most practical relationship in the Norse pantheon, not spiritual, not philosophical, agricultural. Thor made the rain come, and the rain made the food grow, and the food kept people alive through the 9 months of the year when the Norse climate was trying to kill them through cold and darkness, and the specific relentlessness of a winter that did not particularly care whether they survived it. They hung small Mjolnir pendants around their necks, not as symbols of war or divine strength, as protection. The specific kind of reassurance that comes from having something between you and the dark that is strong enough to matter. The sailors prayed to Thor because the sea in the Norse world was the most immediate and unpredictable source of death available, and Thor controlled the storms that decided whether you made it or ended up at the bottom of the ocean. If the storm came and the boat went down, everyone drowned and their families starved. And everything that depended on that voyage not ending badly, ended badly. Thor was the specific point of intervention between the storm and the outcome. They prayed to him because he was reachable in a way the other gods were not. Odin quotes favor came at a price rarely clear until after you had paid it. His interventions in human affairs were real but complicated, and often came with consequences that unfolded over years in ways that were difficult to trace back to the original divine attention. Odin was playing a longer game than most humans could follow, and his interest in individual human lives was always partly in service of something larger that the individual human was not necessarily going to enjoy being part of. Thor quotes interventions were immediate and obvious, and exactly what they appeared to be. He hit the thing. The thing stopped being a problem. You could understand that. You could build a relationship with a god whose entire approach to the world was legible in a way that most divine behavior was not. He was also genuinely on the side of humanity in a way that was not complicated by other agendas. Odin created humans and valued them, and also used them. His relationship with humanity was always partly instrumental. Humans worshipped the gods, and that worship mattered, and Odin understood the transactional nature of the relationship. He cared about humanity, but he cared about a lot of things, and humanity was one item on a long list that included the fate of the cosmos, and the accumulation of wisdom, and the preparation for Ragnarok. Thor just liked people. The mythology does not make a big statement about this. It shows it in the details. Thor traveled through Midgard regularly, in a way the other gods did not. He ate with farmers. He stayed in ordinary houses. He was comfortable in the human world in a way that Odin, who moved through it disguised and observing, was not. He was not conducting research or gathering intelligence or managing the long-term relationship between gods and humans for strategic reasons. He was just there. Present in a way that the most powerful and complicated gods were not, because presence requires a kind of uncomplicated engagement with the immediate moment that wisdom and strategy and the long view tend to complicate. Odin was always thinking about what came next. Thor was always thinking about what was in front of him right now. For ordinary people living ordinary lives in an uncertain world, a god thinking about what was in front of him right now was more useful than a god thinking about the shape of eternity. They named their children after him. Thursday is his day, and has been for over 1,000 years, and will continue to be, because the reach of what ordinary people needed from their gods extended far past the end of the Norse religious world, into the calendar of civilizations that had never heard of Mjolnir, or the Midgard Serpent, or the 9 worlds. They did not name their children after Odin in anything like the same numbers. Odin's wisdom was real, and his power was real, and his importance to the Norse cosmos was undeniable. But Odin was not someone you named your child after if you wanted the child to have a straightforward relationship with the world. Thor was. Because what he was, and what he did, and what he wanted were all the same thing, and they were all aimed at the same outcome. The people praying to him also wanted, which was for the things trying to kill them to stop. He was not subtle about any of this. That was the whole point. Here is what Thor actually was. Not the greatest warrior in the 9 worlds, though he was that. Not the protector of humanity, though he was that too. Not the god of thunder, or the wielder of Mjolnir, or the killer of giants, though all of those things were true. Thor was the only god in Norse mythology who was exactly what he appeared to be. In a pantheon built on concealment, this was extraordinary. Odin moved through the world in disguise, dozens of names, different faces depending on what a situation required. Loki was, by definition, never quite what he appeared. Shapeshifter, liar, the being whose entire existence was built around the gap between surface and substance. Freya had depths the mythology hints at without fully revealing. Even Tyr, the most straightforward of the major gods, had a complexity in his relationship with law and sacrifice that required unpacking. Thor had no depths to unpack. What you saw was what he was: strong, direct, uncomplicated, genuinely on the side of the humans, who prayed to him in a way that was not strategic or shaped by longer calculations. He liked people. He traveled through Midgard. He ate with farmers. He came when he was needed and hit what needed hitting and went home. Not a complicated portrait, never meant to be. The mistake is assuming uncomplicated means lesser, that the god who solved problems with a hammer was a diminished version of what a god was supposed to be, compared to the god who hung himself from the world tree for 9 days to obtain forbidden knowledge. That strength without wisdom is a deficiency, rather than a different kind of thing. The Norse world needed both. Odin, quote, "Wisdom was real and necessary, and without it, the gods would not have survived as long as they did. The runes, the knowledge of what was coming, the long game of preparation and sacrifice, all of that came from Odin, and it mattered enormously. It also did not stop Ragnarok. Nothing stopped Ragnarok. That was not how Norse cosmology worked. The wisdom Odin accumulated across a divine lifetime of sacrifice and loss did not produce a way out of the ending. It produced a better understanding of the ending and some preparation for what came after. Wisdom, applied to an inevitable conclusion, yields acceptance and preparation. Not survival. Thor did not try to understand Ragnarok. He went to it. He killed the serpent that needed killing and took 9 steps and fell. And the world ended and began again somewhere in the distance where his sons carried his hammer into a future that did not include him. The most worshipped god in the Norse world was not worshipped because he was the most powerful or the most wise or the most important to the cosmic structure of the 9 worlds. He was worshipped because he was present, because he showed up, because in a world that was going to end badly and everyone knew it, there was a god who stood between ordinary people and the things trying to kill them, and did it without agenda or calculation or the divine detachment that made most gods difficult to reach. Not subtle, not strategic, not the god you wanted when the situation required cunning or patience or careful navigation of something that could not be resolved through force. He was the god you wanted when the storm was coming and the boat was small and you needed something between you and the ocean that was strong enough to matter and simple enough to trust. The farmers understood this. The sailors understood this. The ordinary people who hung small hammers around their necks and named their children after him and gave him a day of the week that has outlasted the civilization that invented it. They understood this. He was not the greatest god. He was the most reliable one. In a cosmos built on uncertainty and ending, reliability was worth more than greatness. Worth more than wisdom. Worth exactly 9 steps on ground shaking with the end of everything, taken by a god who knew what they cost and took them anyway. That was Thor. That was enough.